Hi, and welcome to the Chasing Light podcast, where photographers and cinematographers talk about their craft and life making images. Today on the Chasing Light podcast, we have a really special guest that I am very excited to have on. William Neill has lived in and around Yosemite Park since 1977. In the early 1980s, Bill served as staff photographer at the Ansel Adams Gallery, where he was introduced to Ansel Adams and other fine art photographers. Bill's award-winning photography has been widely published, and his limited edition prints have been collected and exhibited in museums and galleries nationally, including the Museum of Fine Art in Boston, Santa Barbara Museum of Art, the Vernon Collection, and the Polaroid Collection. In 1995, he received the Sierra Club's Ansel Adams Award for conservation photography. His assignment and published credits include National Geographic, Smithsonian, Natural History, Natural Wildlife, Condé Nast Traveler, GQ, Travel and Leisure, Wilderness, Sunset, Sierra, and Outdoor magazines. He wrote over 150 articles on landscape for Outdoor Photographer magazine, and featured articles have appeared in Life, Camera and Darkroom, and Communication Arts. His corporate clients have included Sony, Bear, Canon, Nike, Nikon, The Nature Company, Hewlett Packard, 3M, Neutrogena, UBS Global, and many others. Recently, he was the recipient of the 2025 NANPA Fine Art Photography Award, where I had the pleasure to meet his lovely wife, Sadhna, and it was a great honor to welcome William Neill to the Chasing Light podcast. Welcome, Bill.
Thank you for having me. It's fun to connect. We were just together barely over a week ago, and got a lot of time to connect. So it's fun to dive into all your probing questions.
Yeah, no, NANPA was great. It was my first show, and it was really great to meet lots of amazing photographers, people that I've looked up to for many years. I've read, as I was a kid, I can't tell you probably how many of your articles in outdoor photography, and just was inspired by a lot of your writings and work, of course. So this is really special for me, and again, I really appreciate you being on here. So I ask every photographer the kind of obligatory questions just to get started and give people some background. So I guess my first obligatory question is, how did you get started in photography?
Well, I think going back to my childhood, living in California, we visited national parks in California, and we would sometimes vacation in the Grand Tetons. And so at an early age, I was out, not so much hiking, not so much backcountry, but spending time in national parks, fishing and visiting different places with the family. So I grew to love nature through that process. And then once I graduated from high school, actually the day after I graduated from high school in Virginia, I jumped on a plane and train and ended up in Glacier National Park. And I had a job as a dishwasher in Lake McDonald Lodge coffee shop. But I was in an amazing place and started exploring the backcountry on my days off and started to take pictures, and that kind of got me started. Went to college in Boulder, Colorado, and I'd show people my photographs and all excited about where I'd been and wanting to share that. And I had a friend who I was showing photographs to, and sensing my enthusiasm for where I'd been and showing the pictures, she said, "You should be a photographer." And I said, "Yeah, sounds like a plan." And
were you excited about that, hearing that, or was that something that you hadn't thought about, or
No, I hadn't thought about it. It's like put on a plate in front of me. So and it made sense because I was jazzed about going out in the wilderness and sharing it. I didn't think about what that meant to be a photographer, just that it was a way to share my experiences, and it ended up being a good excuse to make a career out of it, just
Yeah.
going out over and over again.
So from there, where did you end up? You got your the blessing from your teacher and this idea to move forward, as a photographer and explore that. Where did that take you from there?
Well, in terms of finishing up college, my interest in nature kind of got amplified. I started out as a political science major, and I dumped that and found a degree which Boulder had, called environmental conservation, and I finished that degree. And then, since I'd been working in national parks during the summer, I applied for jobs after I graduated. And about a year out of college, I got a job offer in Yosemite. And that was way back in 1977. And I moved from Boulder to Yosemite, and in many ways, shapes, and forms, I never left.
Yeah. And at that time when you were, photographing and before you got to Yosemite, were there mentors and people that you know, were looking at their photography and really liked, that you had hoped you met, or
Well, I didn't really know much about photography at all, but because of my enthusiasm, I enrolled in college and started photographing nature. And I had a professor who was not very into nature, and he was not very into color photography, and it was a black and white photography class. And I was so into color, I wanted to dye my black and white photographs, tint them, with in the darkroom. And we kind of went back and forth and wrangled with what he thought I should be doing versus what I felt like I should be doing. And at the end of the second course, we had portfolio reviews, and I was in his office, and I'd had him for 2 semesters, and he realized that I was stubborn. And I'm a redhead. You can't tell now, but I was very red back then. And so he said, "Well, if you're going to pursue this direction, I have some suggestions." And he had a shelf full of books behind him, and he started pulling down books by classic photographers. Not Ansel Adams. He was not an Ansel Adams fan, but he had Edward Weston books, and Minor White and Win Bullock were the main photographers. He handed me these books and showed me what they were doing, and he kind of opened my eyes to well-known photographers that were photographing natural subjects in a very, I would have to say, magical and mysterious way. Not literal, not descriptive, but capturing something beyond that I was even aware was something to do.
Yeah, well, that was possible. Yeah.
So as I absorbed that information, and in that sense being early influences, I still wanted to make photographs in color. And I was aware of 2 other photographers that influenced me a lot: Ernst Haas and Elliot Porter. And so I was aware of their work, and I could see that there was ways to photograph nature in color that were not postcardy.
Yeah.
So, I determined that, well, what could I do that's distinctive, that's unique, that fits in my wheelhouse? And, making more intimate photographs of nature like the black and white photographers were doing, but using color, would be uh, something that I would pursue, that I was excited about trying. And so
Yeah.
that
And
was in the
and
back of my head.
and was that part of the development of creating your own kind of voice of your photography, right? Was
Oh yeah, definitely,
doing it.
definitely. And when got my first camera, which was in 1974, it came with uh, a 50 millimeter lens, standard kit lens, and then extension tubes. And I was especially interested in macro photography. So while in Boulder, I did more macro photography than anything. And those were close ups, not macro, like super close up, but small details that I would find. And I had a job washing dishes again in the dorms. And where I lived, I found a way to go to work that took me down Boulder Creek, a little tiny slice of nature that I would get up early, go walk down the creek. I just had one camera and a lens tossed in a book bag, basically, because I'd go look for photographs as I went to my job, and then I'd go to classes afterwards. So I was like, early on had a camera and school books and same little backpack, and started picking out pieces of nature there. So that set me up for, after graduating, finding a job in Yosemite. I had that intimate landscape sensibility already developing.
Have you been back to CU at all?
Just a couple of times, not too
Yeah.
often.
So you moved to Yosemite, or you got a job in Yosemite originally.
Mm-hmm.
Did you know you had a job when you got there, or you just went there
No,
and then
I applied for the job. It was a seasonal job, and for the Park Service back then, anyway, you applied in January, and I sent applications out to the various parks, and I did have a job offer.
nice.
So
And so what were you doing originally in Yosemite when you got there?
I was a Sanjan. I was cleaning bathrooms, and I had a degree. It was interesting because I was very interested in the National Park Service. It could have been a possible career direction. I had the natural history background, so I could have gone towards um, being a park ranger. Uh, but they got paid less than the laborers, and
Yeah.
I had to buy film and buy processing, and I got paid more, so I could afford more film. And so
Yeah.
I realized that a year or so in, and I just stuck with that. And I worked for the Park Service for 3 years. And while I was there, while I was photographing, working for the Park Service, I was making photographs, and the Ansel Adams Gallery was there. And they were the ones that had made processing of my slides available. So to get my film processed, I had to go into Ansel's gallery and turn in my film. And I got to know a good longtime friend, Louis Kemper, there. He was the photographer there at the time. And so we shared our work and got to know each other. And then one day he decided to quit, and he asked me if I wanted his job.
Wow, how
So I
great.
went from
Right place, right time, right?
so I went from being a laborer with the government to resident photographer at the Ansel Adams Gallery. All of a sudden, I was a photographer.
That's amazing. I've visited Yosemite. It's probably one of my favorite places on the planet so far that I've seen. And many get to visit, but they don't get to live in Yosemite. Tell us some stories about your time there, and obviously, my understanding is you met Ansel and other photographers there that you became friendly with, and were and ended up influencing your work. So tell us a little bit about that and that time.
Well, I was in a great place to photograph the kinds of things I love. So that was just great fortune there. And then working at the gallery, Ansel had his workshops. I think probably within a month of my first starting the job, Ansel's workshops were in June. They were 2 weeks long. And there would be a group of about 60 students and about 5 or 6 instructors and as many assistant instructors. And so there was this whole learning situation that just was like a master's degree for me. I met Ansel, which was amazing, and a lot of other photographers in different genres, not just landscape. The assistants were very accomplished by themselves, and I got to listen to their lectures. I got to go out on field sessions on my days off. Because I worked at the gallery, I was kind of had an inside track to be able to go to attend the workshop. So I made a lot of good connections through those workshops, especially. And I think besides making friends that have maintained for a long time, I saw how photographers were making a living. And some were professors. Jerry Yulsman was a professor, University of Florida. There was Alan Ross, who had a studio in San Francisco doing commercial work.
And Alan did all of. Alan is he still alive? Doesn't he do a lot of Ansel's prints now to this day? Or
yeah, there's a series of prints called the Yosemite Special Edition prints, and he's been printing those 50 years, probably. So and John Sexton was the director of the workshop, so I got to know him, and we're still friends. I learned a lot from their work. I learned a lot from how they survived as photographers, and I was in a place that was magical to me. So it was a rather decent formula for launching my career. And when I arrived in Yosemite, I was 23. Started work at Ansel's Gallery, I was 26. And then in 1984, the same year Ansel passed away, I went out on my own. So I've been self-employed since 1984.
Wow, that's a big accomplishment just in itself, right? I mean,
it's a joy and it's a blessing and a curse in many ways. Just mostly blessing, 90% blessing, but it's also I haven't had a steady income since 1984.
Yeah.
So I never had a regular paycheck since then. So it was adventurous. It was stressful at times, but like I said before, I was a stubborn kid and saw from others how I could make it work. And so I stuck with it, and I played the starving artist role for quite a few years, and slowly things started to take off.
I mean, it must have been just amazing to be able to just wake up and, go hike somewhere and shoot in there. Like I said, we I go and visit and I get, 5 days, maybe a week, but to just live there for so many years and be able to see so much in the changing seasons and you kind of in some ways become one, I would guess, with the environment, and where to go, where to be, what to do, what where you want to explore, and that must be so neat to just be so intimate with one area.
Yeah, and it was I wasn't thinking about it much at the time, except Ansel was the example of somebody who knew the place so well. I had the advantage of driving to work 5 days a week for 5 years, from downriver and El Portel into the valley and back again in the evening, through all the seasons. So yeah, it was a wonderful way to absorb all those things you mentioned about timing and lighting and where to be when.
Yeah.
And that's one of the great things about the workshops I'm doing, is that I have that knowledge that can get people into the right place at the right time.
Yeah, I definitely want to take one of those with you. Um, Probably not this fall, but maybe in the spring next year if it's not all sold out already. But
We haven't launched it yet, so
okay, good.
you put in. I'll give you the details.
All right, that
But
would be great.
those workshops for Yosemite Spring 2026 will be the last 2 weeks in April, and we're launching in about 2 weeks.
Okay, great. Yeah, I'd really love to do that. I mean, Yosemite is one of my favorite places, like I said, and it's just, as soon as I could, I took my kids there, you know, to see the place, and
Yeah,
they
my
loved it.
kids
So,
my kids are blasé about it. I mean, they'd like to go there, but it's there. It's like it's not new. It's like they grew up in a small town. They want to go to the city.
well, they've probably been there so many times with you, right? So,
A few, yeah, a few.
yeah.
Yeah.
We were sitting around at NANPA and you guys were talking about, different times, working in the workshop, working in the, at the gallery. Um, but were there any like funny, crazy stories from that time? You were younger. There was, a lot of younger photographers around hanging out.
Yeah, no, it was a good situation. The photographers that I knew were similar age and trying to make their way. So I learned that. Funny stories, nothing's popping into my head right away, but uh, thinking about when I first started teaching photography, uh, like I said, I got this job at the Ansel Adams Gallery, and they said, "Well, you're going to need to lead photo walks."
Okay.
And I had 2 semesters of basic photography. I kind of knew a little bit, but um, all of a sudden I was tossed out with 10, 20 uh, tourists and walked them out through a meadow near the gallery, and I had to figure out what I wanted to teach. So it was funny to try to learn on the fly what I knew,
Yeah. Trial
because
by
I did
fire.
I because I hadn't taught before. So, but I very quickly adopted something I'm sort of proud of, that uh, based on how people were talking to me out in the field on these camera walks. We'd be standing in front of Yosemite Falls, and they would say, what shutter speed do I use? And I'd shrug. I'd be kind of obstinate about it. Say, well, I don't know. Which one do you like? And I didn't do it quite that rudely, but I was like, uh, it's like picking a flavor. Which flavor do you like?
Right.
You don't know until you try a bunch of flavors. Not having a digital back, I couldn't show them the difference, but I decided that I wanted to teach people how to teach themselves about those preferences. So if you shoot one shutter speed and William Neill tells you to shoot 1/25th of a second, and you never look anywhere else, you may miss that, a 15th of a second was really better, or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
So I would encourage early on, even in the film days, for people to experiment that way. And within a couple of years of doing those camera walks, I bought a 4x5 camera. And so I would take those on the camera walks. And because Ansel was closely associated with Edwin Land, Polaroid photography fame, Polaroid Corporation, I ordered Polaroid, basically a proofing black and white
Was
Polaroid
it a
film.
back?
It was a
Okay.
Polaroid, so I put the Polaroid film in the back and take a shot. Then I could whip it out and show people and pass it around. Here's, why I stood here and why I use this shutter speed. And so it's kind of the early version of, taking a look at the digital back.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that was fun to get people visually seeing the image back in the day when that was not commonly possible.
Yeah. And when did you end up switching to digital? I mean, one, obviously, I know a lot of people, a lot of photographers, obviously loved the less weight that they were carrying. But when did you realize, like, okay, this is something that I really can get into? The quality's good enough that, all of that stuff.
Well, I was a Canon Explorer of Light starting in 1995. And so I had two formats that I used quite often. I had a big low camera pack with both systems in the same pack. And I was young enough and just strong enough to carry it around.
Right.
But
Yeah, that's a lot
I
of
would
weight.
shoot 35 millimeter film for quite a few years with my Canon camera for Canon's benefit. And
Yeah.
so being involved with Canon, starting in the early 2000s, they were coming out with whatever it was, the 1DS, I think.
Yeah.
Anyways, and it wasn't quite there yet, but a couple of iterations in, I ended up seeing and getting to use a Canon digital camera and started to, well, I really just switched suddenly. I didn't start to switch, I switched.
Yeah.
And
You just saw the
well,
ability, right, to see what you're doing a lot
yeah, and
easier.
not have to scan film all the time. So I have a vast amount of film that hasn't been scanned, and you know, I would, I started digital printing in the 1994, and so I was getting, film scanned back then. It just limited me how much I could afford to get all my sheets of film scanned. So it just opened up the door. Quality was good enough, but also uh, being able to not have to pick out the perfect image and spend, 50, $100 or whatever it was to get it scanned. And, so it was a limiting factor. So that's when I started.
Yeah, and that also gave you, from what I read, right, and I experienced that too. It gives you full control of your sort of process from shooting all the way to
Yeah. Yeah. That was a
now,
great
now
advantage.
printing, obviously. So you have control of that whole pipeline.
Yeah. Yeah. That was uh, a great benefit. And, I started taking a lot more images. Even back then, computers were expensive, and it took me a while to be able to afford a camera that could handle a 4x5 scan. So just the raw scan was 300 megabytes, and then put some layers on it, and a lot of my
Yeah.
4x5 image files are 700 megabytes, and enough layers, a gigabyte, and takes a lot of computer power back then to run that. So it slowly got to the point where that was possible, uh, and the computers sped up and the prices came down.
Yeah. So moving on from the equipment and everything, for years you wrote articles, and specifically, a lot of articles for Outdoor Photographer. How did that come about? And I know you made lots of friends, like with DeWitt Jones and others right there, who also were writing during that time, right, for Outdoor. And um, tell us how that got started, and you know your progression of time writing those articles at Outdoor Photographer.
Well, I started to have my work published in some magazines, books, calendars, especially. And so when Outdoor Photographer started, which was 1985, um, I found out about it and submitted work to them. So I had the second cover. I had the cover image for the second issue, and so I started to build a relationship with them, and we talked about doing articles, and they were asking me to do a how-to article. Use this aperture, use this shutter speed, whatever. And I, I wasn't interested. which was kind of in one way stupid because I had this open door to get involved with the magazine. But I said, well, let me write something of an artist statement. So I wrote an article which was entitled Intimate Landscapes that they ran in 1986. And so I started submitting articles to them over quite a few years. I didn't start writing the column until, late 1990s. So off and on, a couple times a year, I would have an article in the magazine. So I had the relationship building with them, and then they asked me to write the column. So they were pleased with what I was doing. And I think they knew by then what type of article I would write. And DeWitt Jones was writing articles more about stories and feelings and non-technical essays that were just wonderful. And so his writings kind of gave me permission to do something similar and not be overly technical in my articles. There were other people writing about, it's like George Lepp wrote about technical things a lot, and he was great at it. And Galen Rowell was another columnist, and he was writing about his adventures and assignments, in the Himalayas or climbing Half Dome or whatever. So, I found a niche in there and just kept plugging away.
Yeah, for me, it was like a portal to all these different amazing, photographers such as yourself and locations. And, I always sat there and was like, wow, this would be amazing to go do that, but how am I going to make a living doing that? Right. And you guys found a way to do that. And,
yeah,
I had this competing interest of graphic design at the same time. So I ended up choosing the graphic design route instead of the photographic route. So,
well, I have friends that are maybe not so inclined to go through the torturous aspects of being a freelancer, and it's not for everybody. I wasn't married and I didn't have kids, so I had some freedom there. If you have your disposition is not up to handling that stress, or you have mortgages and kids, etc., then you maybe think about it differently. And I have quite a few friends that just realized pretty early on that they were not going to suffer through what maybe they've seen me suffer through, just uneven income sources. So they're quite happy being a photographer, being an amateur, doing it for the love of it, rather than getting involved in becoming a businessman like I had to do. Reluctantly I did, but I wanted to keep at it. So there's different ways to come to it, and now I'm teaching with folks that are often retired or about to retire. There are so many that have told me about their path in photography. Well, I was the staff photographer on my school newspaper in high school, and back in the film days, and then I went to college, and then I raised a family, and now I'm ready to be a photographer again.
Yeah.
So I'm, it's fun to see them, come to a place where they're doing, something they're so passionate about.
Yeah. I mean, that's why I go on these workshops and get to hang out with you guys, for a week at a time. And it's kind of to explore my creativity, because for me, I can't draw, I can't do any of that stuff. So the camera for me is sort of like how I can capture, what I'm seeing, and there are some people who just can't sit behind a desk, right? And they would never envision themselves doing that. And I envy the fact that you were able to make a career out of it and live in Yosemite, which to me is one of the most amazing places in the world, and just be able to shoot and do whatever, the perception is do whatever you want. But as you're saying, there's this whole other side of, eventually you have a family, you have kids, you have things, and you have to find ways to become a businessman too at the same time. So, but
Yeah.
one thing that I do notice is, and is a theme through a lot of the photographers that I've been interviewing, is there is a level of camaraderie there and support from other photographers. And you saying how you've, along the way in your path, you got to see and hear how other photographers were able to make money and live, and how, how they learned about the business of photography, and there are many different ways to do that: book sales and workshops and working for NGOs, and lots of different things, selling fine art prints. So you sort of have to be diversified, right, at in your business, even though you're just you're a photographer.
Yeah, and I think that's all the struggle for people that want to be a more full-time or totally full-time photographers. What's the, where does the money come from? So people ask me a lot, how do you make a living? What are your sources? It's varied over the years. Back in the stock photography days, that was a big thing. I had a line of posters that was distributed worldwide, so that was a great thing. These things come and go. But I did start to get involved with books, so that became another avenue. Royalties from books were never a big thing. A little bit of this, a little bit of teaching, a little bit of stock photography, a little bit of print sales, and the exact balance is different every year. So it's unpredictable. One thing I wanted to say too that I've learned about teaching, because you mentioned, you can't draw, and I've heard that a lot from people in describing their appreciation of having a camera kind of help them get started. The core thing about that I've heard from a lot of people is that, I'm not creative. So I can stand behind a camera and take a picture. And the presumption that you're not is erroneous to me. And I always try to help people realize that they have their own perspective. So I ask them, so are you, if they say I'm not an artist, I'm not creative, I said, so are you unique? Oh yeah, of course. Yeah. So do you see the world differently than everybody else? Well, yeah. I said, there you go.
Right.
So, if you have a different perspective, you don't maybe haven't tuned into it or need to develop it, but it's there. And whether it's a camera or it's painting or it's whatever it might be, there's a uniqueness to all of us. It's hard to tap. It's not like an easy thing to teach. But yeah. It starts with the belief that you have a valuable, unique perspective.
And then the other thing, instincts. Yeah, and the other thing that you have been teaching people too, and is to find that what you call finding your voice, right? Finding what makes you unique. What is your little niche? What are the things that you see that makes your photography a little different? Once you get into photography or you start shooting images, what trying to find that voice is something that you try to educate people on a lot.
Well, it's like I said, it's a really hard thing to teach, but it's really just based on your interests and what you are passionate about. And it's something, especially if you're just starting out, you go, well, I don't know, I like lots of things, where to go, what to do. But say if you're photographing even for a few years or 5 years or 10 years, and you go back through your images, you can start to see trends, or places you go back to. Oh, I love this place, or I love waterfalls, and I keep going back to waterfalls. That becomes a focus, a direction that you can build upon. You can go back into your archive and pull out, wow, I forgot about this waterfall picture, and you're pulling them up, and all of a sudden you have the beginning of a portfolio.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things, I was on the Redwoods workshop with Visionary Wild, and you were the guest appearance there, which I was so ecstatic about. I was like, this is crazy.
That was fun.
It was great. And I said this to Justin too. I have a tendency to just be excited that I'm out shooting. I'm in the wild and, in the forest or wherever. And, I tend to like start shooting all the wide shots of everything. And, one of the things on that workshop that you were very good at trying to get people to focus on was, like,
Encouraging.
yes, encouraging is like, look down, look at some of the details here that you're missing, because especially in the forest, like it's so overwhelming, right? This huge space, these giant trees. And then, you look down and you see, all these amazing, you know, bushes and plants and, flowers and stuff like that, people are not necessarily paying attention to because we're just not in that all day long every day, so.
Right. Well, and you can think about, that perspective. You could just be doing all intimate scenes. But for a lot of people going to a place, you also want to describe it. So wide views have a role to play, but it has a tendency to be, it's, changing lenses can be a pain. It's like, oh God, I have to get my telephoto out, and so you see through the process of, well, now I have a body of work. I have some wide views of the forest and, some interesting conditions with a little bit of mist. Not that we had a lot of good fog, but
Yeah. Yeah.
uh, but if you put a set of images together from that trip and you have a mixture of scale and, intimate scenes and wider views and middle view landscapes, that it becomes more interesting. It's kind of like thinking about photographing for National Geographic. Your storytelling. Here's the trail we walked down, and here's the fern in my feet, and here's shooting straight up into the canopy, and here's, an overview of the forest, or here we are out at the coast, at the beach or something. So it starts to be a more interesting body of work for somebody else to look through.
And, your work, you have amazing vistas, but for me, looking at your books and looking at your work, a lot of the detail shots and the blurred shots and the, textural shots are, to me, what sets your work apart from so many others too, is that you're paying attention to all of that detail. So,
well, it's trusting my instincts and finding where I'm passionate subject. So that's just built up over the decades.
yeah.
To be my deal.
So you've published, a number of books, and I'm sure they're like giving birth every time. I'm sure it's a ton of work. But is there one that stands out that's your favorite of all the books that you've done so far? I have 3 of your books, so luckily I have them right here actually. This is the new one that I got, right? Light in the
There you go.
landscape,
Yeah.
on the landscape. Yeah. And then the this is the latest one, right?
Correct.
Sanctuary in Stone. These are amazing books, by the way. For those of you that don't have them, you should pick one of these up. They're amazing. And
see the links
like
below.
This type of stuff, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
The dogwoods and the motion in the background. Stuff's amazing.
Well, do I have to pick one? Like picking one of my favorite child?
Well, tell us. I mean, is there?
Yeah, I'll
one
tell
or
you my
two?
favorite.
I mean,
Yeah, I'll
okay.
give you my favorite. So, the first monograph I did was called Landscapes of the Spirit. It came out in the 1996, and it was a collection of that I picked out favorite, more intimate landscape scenes, and that was I worked with an editor who was very knowledgeable about nature literature, and so the essays included in the book were really powerful to me and added to the sense of what nature gives to our spirit, be a place of refuge, be a sanctuary.
Do you write any of these or any of the, like, some of the topics and then give that to somebody in that case, or are they just looking at your photographs?
Some of them were generated by the publishers.
Okay.
And then this book was my idea. So it varies. Some of the books, a lot of the books I did were generated by the publishers, basically. And so I had to follow their lead. It wasn't very much in my control, actually, which was fine. It was less work that way. But so Landscapes of the Spirit, I think, is a powerful statement. And then I did a retrospective book in 2017 that was published by an English publisher that's now defunct. So that was a collection of chapters containing my portfolios. So one chapter was Landscapes of the Spirit. Another chapter was By Nature's Design, a collection of my pattern images. One was black and white photographs. One was the ICM photographs. They all had their names, like Sanctuary in Stone, Landscapes of the Spirit, Impressions of Light was the ICM photographs, Meditations in Monochrome was the black and white photographs, and then Antarctic Dreams was from my first trip to Antarctica. So that was a collection of some of my favorite themes all in one book. So that was pretty exciting. And then the third fave is the newest one, Yosemite, which is 48 years worth of photographs.
Yeah, it's beautiful. It's just spectacular.
And it was self-published, so it was financially an adventure, bit of a risk, but it turned out quite well. So it came out beautifully with some more than usual birthing pains.
Yeah.
On the production end, as you were on the receiving end of all my apology letters. No, maybe it's going to be in January. Maybe it'll be in March.
It's hard. It's hard publishing a book. I mean, it's just, you want to get everything right, and you want your images to be right. You want, that it's like a birthing process.
Well, I had enough experience with other books to have some confidence there, and then learning how to use Lightroom was quite helpful, because I have ebooks out, and I developed PDFs of ebook PDFs.
Yeah.
And so I had.
And so, did you do your whole layout? Did you do all your layouts and everything in Lightroom?
Most of them were done that way. Yeah.
Yeah.
So once I got to the Yosemite project, I had a little bit of skill on that end, and all my work is done and goes through Lightroom anyway. All my collections are in Lightroom, so it was I had a head start in that regard.
And in the Yosemite book, I know that, and I've seen you talk about this at NANPA and other things, other discussions, where you really try to pair up images, right, of different, they might be different locations or different times, but the images have a similar feeling to each other.
Yeah, it was fascinating and torturously joyful process.
Yeah.
So, but you put it out on a screen in Lightroom, and you can just move images around, and look at the pairings and see what worked. And sometimes I wanted contrast, winter, spring, or I wanted two details together, or one broad view and one detailed view next to each other. And so it was color matching, subject matching, mood matching. It took a few months to do.
I can imagine. There's another book here. You didn't list it as your favorite, but I've been starting to read it, and which is this book, the portfolio development book.
Yeah.
It's I do what you say not to do in here with my photos, which is I list them by location. Here's my Yosemite photos. Here's which typically everybody or a lot of people do. What made you make this book? What was the impetus for that?
First of all, I think location-based portfolios is the right place to start. It's a logical place to start. So there's nothing wrong with that. My suggestion in the book is kind of taking it to maybe a little more evocative and creative level, where your Yosemite photographs are called in Sanctuary of Stone, and that has, whatever implications those words have can orient the viewer. So even though it's about a place, it's the title has some suggestive qualities to it. But to go back to the genesis of the book, I taught for a online program called betterphoto.com, which was a very big program and on the cutting edge of online teaching. And I didn't know what I wanted to teach really, but I got the idea from teaching people over many years that I could help them organize their work and focus their work better. And so I wrote the lessons in the book you just showed were lessons in this program. And I had people for 8 weeks. So there are 8 lessons in the book, but I would start people off with the first lesson and start seeing what they were most passionate about, getting a theme for the course, getting them to show me an overview of their work, and then I started to pick out ideas and suggestions for themes, and then the assignments in each lesson would have people going out and making new photographs to add to the portfolio. And through that whole process, by the end of 8 weeks, people had refined their thinking. They had written an artist statement. They had a tightly edited body of work it might be 20 photographs for a box of fine art prints, or it might be 40 photographs for an online portfolio. It might be 100 photographs for a book, but that had to be consistent quality all the way through. And that was part of the ongoing lesson through the whole course, helping them learn what was worthy and not.
Yeah.
Becoming
and to focus, right? To focus the subject matter, right? On
focusing the subject matter and to improve their ability to self edit. Like, yeah, that was a great day and that was a pretty picture and it's nice, but when I look at the images of the group, it's either like too much like what other people are doing, or it's just doesn't have the greatest light, or the design could have been better, like a notch below 5 stars. Well, these are 3 or 4 stars, and maybe I need to have all 5 stars in this project, in this portfolio. So the end game was that I taught this course for 8 years and consistently saw people basically become better photographers through that process, not just any technical abilities, but by editing and focus.
Were they becoming better photographers? And I'm not questioning that they weren't, but were they becoming better photographers, or were they also, or was it more about them being able to display and show people the best of their photography, even if it was less images than it was, which of course I'm sure informed them of when they went out again, what was important and whatnot. But because I found that, like you said, there's threes and fours, and then you have your fives, and you should really only be showing, even if there's only two out of your entire shooting experience, whatever that is, those are the ones you want to show versus trying to show other stuff that might not be as good.
Well, calling somebody a better photographer involves their conveying that,
Yeah.
which
Okay.
involves how well they edit. So if I show you all my mistakes, I'm going to not be as good. so
Yeah.
so if you learn to edit tightly, then that's part of being a better photographer. Not just behind the camera. I use the right light and composition and shutter speed and aperture, but I also picked out the best of whatever theme I'm developing.
This past January, you got the opportunity to go back to Antarctica, right, with Visionary Wild. How was that experience, and did you notice anything different versus the first time you were there? How many years was it between visits?
11 years.
11 years. Wow.
So I went on a trip with 60 photographers the first time. Going with Visionary Wild and Justin Black, we had 10 clients. So it was different
Big
in the
difference.
sense of a small ship, and I was there for 13 days instead of 5 days this last trip. But as far as physically, the environment, I didn't notice it being that different, although I know it's changed. I don't have enough reference. It's so vast. It's not like you're, parking in front of one glacier. And, I tried to do that, tried to find photographs I'd taken of a same subject both times, but it's just,
Yeah. The
you
landscape
can't
changes
really
so much,
see.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But, the glaciers are retreating. So if you had a time lapse over those 11 years, it would probably show quite dramatically.
Yeah. I talked to Justin. He was saying that some of the animals have had to move down the beach or down a ways because they don't have ice to sit on anymore, or
Yeah.
they're sitting on rocks instead of
Yeah. It's, I don't know a lot about the wildlife changes, but where they breed and where they winter. If the ice isn't there, that changes a lot of things.
yeah.
It can be muddy now instead of frozen, so sometimes the chicks have been hatched in muddy conditions, and they're not surviving at the same rate. So
Yeah.
it's tough. It's not all doom and gloom, but there's the bird flu too, and we saw some evidence of that.
Really.
So
Wow.
there's serious issues that I don't know enough about to expound upon. But the main thing is to just get at least some basic knowledge of what's happening to the planet and
Yeah.
make decisions based on that.
I mean, you've posted a number of photos from that trip online, and they're just spectacular. Some of the shots you got are just amazing.
Just pointing around, it's like it's all right there. It's not. I mean, it certainly photographic skills involved, but the place makes it relatively
Yeah.
easy. And Justin has been down there at least 10 times and has the knowledge and had been on that ship many times. So he was kind of in charge of that. But we also were out on Zodiacs, and I felt a little more inclined to ask the Zodiac drivers to go back or go around and come back again and spend more time on one subject than another.
Yeah.
But there's so much going on around you. It's like you leave one place. Oh, that was great. That was great. Do we have to go? Yeah. And then you're disappointed for about 5 seconds, and you see something else and go,
Yeah.
oh, what was I worried about? It's like, there's more to behold.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm sure it's amazing down there. I hope to get down there sometime.
Sounds good. I don't know when I'm going back, but hopefully it'll happen.
Yeah.
I do hope to
Um,
go to Iceland. I've never been to Iceland, and so many
Iceland's amazing.
photographers, so many photographers that keep telling me what you're telling me. So I've got to go one of these days.
Yeah, I got
Yep.
to spend 3.5 weeks in Iceland traveling around the entire country, and it's very diverse and it's just spectacular. But I don't want to make it I don't want to say that it's so amazing because I don't want you to be disappointed when you go, when people hype things up and then it doesn't meet whatever expectations. So I'm just going to say that it's nice and there's a diversity of landscape there that you're.
Well, if anybody out there is interested in going with me, I'm talking to Justin about putting a trip together next year. So hopefully that'll
Oh,
happen.
that's awesome. You mentioned earlier, ICM, and can you explain ICM? And I know you've been playing around with it a lot more recently. I obviously you've been doing it for a while, but they may not have called it ICM at that time. But tell me a little bit about that, and because a lot of the photos that you've created are amazing and they're abstract and color and texture, and so tell me a little bit about that and your experimenting with it.
Well, it's something that I used to actually do a lot more. I do it a little bit now. So there was a phase, maybe starting in 2005, where I started to see people using this technique. And ICM stands for intentional camera motion. And for me, it means one exposure, one frame while moving the camera. So if I'm photographing a forest, I'll be moving my camera up and down. If it's out on a beach, I'll be going horizontally. Or if I'm out on the desert, I'll be moving the camera side to side. It's something that just gave me a way to make to kind of a painterly uh, approach to illustrating the subject. Um, that I liked. It took some of the context out. It was a little less literal, and the painterly effect just fascinated me. So I spent several years doing it a lot. And uh, one of the fun things about it is it's just that it's like sketching. It's kind of free and loose. I'll be working out in the field with somebody, and they go, I want to see how you do it, or I said, well, you give it a try, and they go, they move the camera like this, click.
Right.
I said, no, 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 no. You go on high speed, hold the shutter down, start moving your camera. So I'll do that. If it's trees, I'll do this. If it's, and I'll end up taking 5, 10, 15 frames just in one burst until the memory, the buffer
The buffer
hits.
fills up. Yeah.
So it's kind of free and loose. It can take a lot of frames to get a good image or two, but it's a way to kind of shut off my controlling 4x5 perfect composition
Yeah.
mentality and get a little more loose. But the some of the same principles apply. So with a composition, the spacings between trees,
Hmm.
or how you render it can make it. Where you stand can still make a big difference. It's not like you can be sloppy, but when you're actually making the exposures, you can, try one shutter speed. You can try moving the camera fast. You can move it slow. You can go linear. You can go around and around if you want, but you just look back at the camera and you get the feedback and, say, well, that was awful and this was great. And so I'll do more of the, what was working.
That is one of the nice things about digital camera too, right? You get that
A big,
instant, immediate
big,
feedback, right, of being able to see what you've
yeah,
just done.
big factor. Yeah.
I mean, was ICM a thing like in the film world when you couldn't see stuff? Were people deliberately trying to do that? I mean, I know people were following a subject, like let's say it might be sports or whatever, and trying to blur the background, but have the, you know, subject be in focus. But was that really something people were playing around with in, with
Well, no,
film so
I
much?
think it's more like what you said, just the, panning a subject was more common for sure. I don't remember seeing much of it being done um, on a static nature subject. Uh, but there were still, in the film days, people were doing multiple, frames, multiple exposure combinations.
Yeah,
So shooting many frames on top of each other, that sort of thing. So it was being done, but not quite to the extent you see now. With
yeah,
digital, it's so much easier to see what you're doing and predict the results. And I have photographs that are ICM where I'm actually following a bird flying across the beach. And everything else gets blurred, and I got to have a impression of the bird and an impression of the beach. So it can be combined as well.
yeah. That you've got some amazing photos of that are just so painterly and so um, Van Gogh-ish, or you
Hmm.
know, they're really amazing.
Well, the different shutter speeds makes a big difference. How much blur you want, how much edge you want. So by playing with different shutter speeds and different speeds of the camera motion, you can make it softer and more watercolor like, or you can make it more kind of staccato lines across the screen
Yeah.
where it's a little edgier, depending on the subject.
So at NANPA, you were doing portfolio reviews this year. What did anything you saw there that was really interesting? And do you, I guess the other question is, do you have any words of advice for aspiring landscape and nature photographers based on like some of the things that you might have seen from people and their work?
Well, I think the big thing is having, putting yourself in the position to get feedback. And referring back to the portfolio development book, that's one thing that's missing in the book is you don't have, you know, the the teacher monitoring your way through all the lessons. So, being in a position where you have friends or you have workshop instructors and get feedback on this direction you're taking is very valuable. You don't always see the trends that you have, and so, you know, putting yourself in that vulnerable position of showing your work to a professional and wondering what they're going to say and how nice they're going to be or whatever.
Right.
I'm like, very, very often I have people tell me, don't hold back. Just rip it up.
Well, if you've gone to art school, you're used to critiques and you want somebody to be as ruthless as possible. But you, as the critiquer, not knowing people's experience, right, of whether they've had that kind of experience before, it's probably a little bit like walking on eggshells a little.
Yeah, well, I reassure people that I am just all about positive feedback, and I'm not the art professor in your art class that's going to rip you up. That's just
Right.
not my disposition. But I reassure them that they'll um, have my honest feedback and give them, directions to improve. So it doesn't have to be a rip your throat out kind of
Right.
approach or destroy your ego approach. So, I think just that's the great thing about workshops is being able to get feedback from, like like we did in the redwoods, or like I do in Yosemite. In Yosemite we have two instructors, Alex Noriega and myself, and we have, we both talk about the photographs and talk about technique and, the emotional, the creative side of it. I just encourage people to there's some online places, Nature Photographers Network, places that have forums where you can show your work and get feedback from people without having to travel to a workshop or pay
Yeah.
much money.
I mean, that is one thing I do love. I mean, obviously going out and shooting is amazing when you're on, in the field and you're on a workshop, but just as valuable, if not more, is coming back and looking at people's photos and seeing, the instructors, your guys' thoughts on cropping and how they process their images and, um, selection of images and all of that is so important. And I love that portion of the workshops as
Yeah,
well.
and you're with other photographers, so you have like-minded people, and then you see how somebody else photographs something, or you hear
Yeah.
something one of the instructors uh, say to somebody else that you realize that might apply to you too. And so you don't have to take the emotional hit of getting
Yes.
getting critiqued about your image. You get to hear other people get feedback that also gives you ideas, visual ideas, or things to do better.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, was there anybody's work at NAMPA this year that you thought, wow, these people were great? Or
Well, I think you were aware there was a guy named Miles from England who was there,
yeah,
who was one of my victims for critiques, and his work was spectacular.
yeah, I've
So
connected with him. I connected with him there, and we've been talking since. So
good, good.
yeah,
Yeah,
he's what 3 years into photography, and just some
yeah,
of his choices on processing are just amazing.
and he's an accountant. It's not like
Yeah,
you know a creative field, so it's fun to see somebody get get a fast start on it. But I think there's a lot of upcoming nature and landscape photographers in my field that are have roughly half my age that are really doing great work, and they're not just trying to make a living. They're trying to do important work and personal work. So that's it's very encouraging to me. And Miles at NANPA was, you know, uh, not a professional, but doing great work. So it's just encouraging to me and educational to me to see what other people are doing. And teaching really has to be a two-way street.
yeah,
It's I learn a lot from how other people treat their subjects and what they find in the field that I don't see. It's like, I don't see everything the same way somebody else does. So it's really edifying to see the world through other people's eyes, whether professional or amateur.
yeah. I think one of the things that was really cool for me about NAMPA is just seeing all these photographers that are making a living, but they're trying to really use their images for good in some way. My wife always says to me, like, what are you going to do with all these pictures that you've taken? And it's great to see them using them for different conservation things with different NGOs, or trying to get you know uh, doing stuff within their communities. um, I liked to see that was kind of a message at NANPA. I mean, it's probably one of its main charters, obviously, but that was my first time being at a NAMPA, so it was great.
Yeah, it's pretty powerful to see what more extroverted photographers are doing than
Hmm.
myself. But I've kind of, in some ways, resigned to being as dedicated to my art as possible, and hope that it affects people, but it's in a pretty indirect way. It's not so out there in the world, and not. I don't know how to put it. Just I often wonder how much impact I have on the environmental side, and I try to rest assured that it's the beauty that I'm trying to convey is something that has an important message.
Do you get calls at all now to do anything for NGOs, or is that not something that
No,
is that
for
something you have
whatever
an interest
reason.
in, or not really wanting to do so much, so you
No,
don't put
I
yourself out
just
there?
haven't really been approached, so I haven't put myself out there in that regard either.
Yeah.
So no, it doesn't happen much at all. I have friends that do it a lot, so it hasn't been something I pursued, and it hasn't come my way on its own.
Are there peers of yours that you look at their work and are like amazed at their work? There might not be your mentor or anything, but you.
Oh yeah, there's lots of them. Yeah, I mean, my teaching partner Alex Noriega just blows me away all the time. Um,
He's
they're
young too, right? Isn't he in his 30s or 40s?
uh, late 30s,
Your late 30s,
and
yeah.
there's T.J. Thorne. There's who's out of Portland area. There's a guy named in Scotland named Bruce Percy. Another Scottish photographer, Alistair Benn. Love their work. Eric Bennett is even younger than Alex, and he's doing great work. So um, it's inspiring to me to see, like I said earlier, that kind of a next generation thing. Uh,
Yeah.
uh, but I also get inspiration from them. Then, like you said at NANPA, seeing Art Wolf's photographs of Franz Lanting's work, not only the work itself, but how they're making use of it, and how it, in a sense, how it's packaged, like especially in book form.
Yeah, I
I
got
have
I
a
got Art's book. It's pretty beautiful.
So yeah, it's there's so many directions to go. Maybe I'm stuck in my ways at my age, but there are there's lots of sources of inspiration out there,
Yeah.
which is real positive to me.
Yeah, that's great. Um I'm sure those people would be great to hear that too. Coming from you.
Well, that would be cool.
So what's next for you, Bill? What's on the docket over the next 6 months, a year? What are you doing?
Well, I'm still doing a few workshops. So I mentioned Iceland. I'm doing a visionary workshop in Death Valley next March. I'll be in Eastern Sierra with Justin in October. Uh, International workshops, I'm hoping to nail that down soon. Uh, at the moment, I'm trying to get fully in gear on a new book um, based on my national park images. So the last several days, I've been copying 4x5 film. So that's exciting. I have so much work that hasn't been seen.
Yeah.
It's exciting to get it out of mothballs, basically.
Yeah, it's cool to go back and revisit stuff, right? And it's like,
Yeah.
wow, why didn't I ever pick that photo? You're, you know.
Well, there's the going back and looking at things, and in the case of this project and book projects in general, I'm pulling out things that I haven't shown before. Um, but I'm also very engaged in making new work, so I'm really pleased with what I've been doing and excited to keep making images. So I know, I guess it was Ansel's autobiography or biography, not his autobiography, that Ansel's really slowed down in his 70s, and um, as far as making new images. And not that I'm trying to force myself to make new images. I'm still excited about going into Yosemite after nearly 50 years and finding new things. And it's a challenge, but you get selective after a few decades, but
Yeah.
nature is nature still, and its beauty hasn't changed all those years.
And when you do go back to Yosemite, time and time again, are you going with something in mind that you want to try to get? Like, okay, the dogwoods are out right now, so I'm going, and that's what I'm going to try and shoot. Or is it you're open and whatever I discover, I discover?
Yeah, it's often I'm up there because I'm teaching, like especially dogwood season. The workshops are planned for that.
Yeah.
But if there's some thunderstorms coming in, I might go up to Glacier Point. Or if there's a snowstorm in Yosemite Valley, I might go up. But I don't go up all that often, really. Idealized perspective of what we do as landscape photographers is we're just outdoors all the time. And there are photographers that are much better at it than I am. But for various reasons, I'm closer to home, and I have a beautiful piece of property where different times of year I find things to photograph. So I can look out my window and just enjoy nature, whether I decide to photograph it or not. So like I said, Yosemite's just case by case, what might be happening. Not so much like I need to get a photograph of this or that, but these are good times to be going up there. So
Yeah.
like
I was
this
going to
time,
say you inspired me to clean up my backyard behind me and put some squirrel. Well, they're bird feeders, but they're squirrel feeders, and
bird
some
feeders that
other
feed their
things.
squirrels.
Yes, and sit in my backyard and take some photos of birds and stuff, which I've never really sat and done. Sitting here in Los Angeles, but it's been quite fun, actually.
Well, I've done. I often collect things in nature, so I collect leaves or rocks or something, and so I have a whole resource of things that I've photographed over the years or collected that sometimes I'll pull out and photograph. I have a whole series called Natural Collections on my website of nautilus shells or interesting leaves that I've collected, and I'll photograph them in different ways, and that those things go through phases. I'm not doing that right now, but I did that for a few years and put a body of work together.
Yeah,
Put it up on the website.
yeah. It's for those of you that don't know, you should definitely check out Bill's Instagram. He posts a bunch of stuff. What's your Instagram, Bill? Do you remember it?
William Neill,
Okay.
really
And
unique.
and your website, right? WilliamNeill.com.
Correct.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely go check that out if you haven't seen stuff. Pick up some of the books. Like I said, this one's amazing too.
Yeah.
But this is the new one. It's really spectacular.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. It's we're starting to run out of books, so
oh,
I
so
expect to sell out in the next several months.
all right. Well, so hurry up, get
So
yourself a book.
hurry up.
Bill, thank you so much for being on the Chasing Light podcast. I really, really appreciate it. I love hanging out with you. So hopefully I'll get on another workshop or see you somewhere
All
where we
right.
can grab some food and talk some more. But I
Sounds great.
really, really appreciate you being on here.
Thank you.